Hey everyone, my name is Daniel Roddick, and I am super excited to have you today on Partner Pulse with our new partners at Tatari and Philippe, the founder and CEO of Tatari. Philippe, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well today. Thanks, Daniel, for asking.
Yeah, look, super excited to have you. For anyone who's tuning in for the first time, Partner Pulse is a place we use here at Clearco to profile our existing and today a partner that literally was just announced a couple of hours earlier. And so if you check, the link in the chat, you'll see some content posted there about our partnership, and that's what really we're going to be here to talk about. Of who is Philippe, who is Tatari, why are we working together? I encourage anyone who's watching, please drop your questions in the comments, and if it makes sense for a discussion, we'll try to loop it in. So we have a lot to talk about, a lot of great brands to profile, but before we jump into that, I just want to spend some time on you, Philippe. And normally I run another show on our 24-hour news channel that we are starting, as I told you about, on Founders Live, and I find it really interesting just to almost start at the beginning of you're built an amazing company at Tatari, and we'll get there. But tell me more about yourself. Where did you grow up? What was growing up like in whatever city you grew up in, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, for sure. So my accent is Belgian. So I grew up in Belgium. I think I was a little too old by the time I moved to the US. I've got two daughters, 9.5 and 11, and so they now make a lot of fun of my English, and they're very quick to correct me. But I kind of first learned about technology in Silicon Valley, kind of when I came out to the States for school. Actually, my first job, believe it or not, was an investment banker.
Wow.
But I do like tech, I do like math, science, and things like that. And so that's me in a nutshell, living in San Francisco.
Amazing. And growing up in Belgium, so we'll get to kind of the first business you started, which was Shazam, but and it looks like you've at least officially on LinkedIn co-founded a couple of businesses. But when you were growing up, was that part of your, like, were you like a hustler, had these little side jobs, or was it mostly school and you just discovered it later? What was that kind of early days for you like?
Yeah, probably a little bit of both. My parents had their own business, small business, but they definitely instilled me with the notion of hard work, and they instilled me with the notion of founding your own company, running your own company. My mom is very averse to change, but every single time, like in the past, when I start companies, it's like I'm starting this company. She was always she is back then always very approving. So, you mentioned Shazam. So it's a good example of that, right? Because I had just graduated from Berkeley, the kind of the MBA class where you're expected to, take a job, often high paying, and so obviously I left all of that aside to start Shazam without any money and student debt and everything like that. But still, my mom still approved.
Amazing. Well, you got her seal of approval, so you're good to go. I mean, I do want to take a moment to just talk about that because at the end of what we're really going to talk about is our partnership is Clearco exists to fund entrepreneurs and help fund their hopes and dreams and fund their growth, and that's part of why we're partnering together. But for you back then when you started Shazam, you're like, well, what was the story of why you decided to do that? Because that sounds kind of an illogical decision for the everyday person. For a founder, I totally get it, but what was going through your head when you decided, like, what, I'm putting in my resignation letter and I'm going to go work on this crazy app, like
yeah a lot of some, how they say ignorance is bliss, right? I don't think I fully realized the absurdity of the risk that we were taking on. So the background to Shazam is that one of my co-founders and I were in business school together, and we had decided that we wanted to start our own companies. We had lots of ideas, some of them really good, some of them really bad, which make a whole show in its own right. But we thought that Shazam was a very neat one. We decided we'd go for that. And this is the part which I would not recommend to anybody. The technology didn't really exist. So it was complete kind of like backwards approach. We're like, this is a fantastic commercial application. No, let's go invent the tech. So usually you invent the tech first and then you find a product market fit. Anyway, I guess we got lucky, or we were smart, and we got out of the ground. But yeah, it's amazing. Look, back then, companies like Clearco were not around, or even in the bigger picture, right? You wouldn't have Google Cloud or AWS, right? Technologies that you could tap in very freely. So we did it the old-fashioned ways, raise a kind of first $1 million of angel investment by just harassing anybody in the music industry, former CEO and chairmen of labels, and then convincing them to put in some of their personal money. But yeah, we had to build everything from scratch. And ultimately, Shazam is a search technology, right? Instead of searching HTML pages, we searched music or music pages, fingerprints, whatever you want to call it. And so the computer network and the whole system, we had to build this from scratch. If you came into the Shazam office in the early days, the floors were littered with CPUs and screws and screwdrivers and you name it. Everything had to be built from scratch. I still remember buying RAID storage for $10,000 a terabyte.
Imagine if you had AWS back then. Insane.
And this is the great news, right? Because there's so many of these unnecessarily hurdles, whether it's related to technology, right, hardware, financing. They've been cleared. You can actually really focus on your core product and making that worthwhile.
And I'm just curious on two separate tangents before we leave the Shazam story. I always love asking this question. If you didn't do Shazam, you said there's a bunch of other ideas. What would have been the other idea? What was the 1A that you could have quit and worked on?
Yeah, well, this is the one that I sometimes have regret about. So this is the late 90s, and the FCC had put out a mandate that all the early cellular operators had to be able to triangulate a cellular phone within about 70 meters or 70 yards, whatever, for 911 purposes. So I thought, well, and this is again personal experience. I had a meeting in Palo Alto, and I was an hour late to that meeting because of the rain and traffic. And I looked at MapQuest back then. I'm like, that's absolutely silly. We should have like green and yellow and red lanes on the freeway, right? So you see how busy it is. And so if I can get all the cellular operators to operate with me to anonymously share the position of a cell phone along the freeway, I can calculate actually the time, not so much the directions of getting to your destination. So I thought it was a good idea. I probably should have written a patent around it because this is what obviously Google Maps did 100 times better. But that would have been an alternative.
Yeah. Well, eventually you do find your way to Google one way or the other later on.
I take it as a compliment,
Yeah, exactly. So so on just the early days of Shazam, I'm also very fascinated by the pitch of like. So I understand this vision of it's a search engine. You're also very early days to what is now this voice audio. Everyone's talking about that from a brand world, right? So you're kind of first players in that. What was the pitch, and who was the first person that said yes? Like, what was that story like? That first investor, whether they led or they said yes, or first money in. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think the first person to buy in of like real significance was actually the inventor of the 56K modem.
Wow.
There's a person, his name is Brent Townsend. He invented the 56K modem all by himself, and actually a lot of it's all about digital signal processing, which is kind of the math and the systems or behind these Shazam algorithms. And when he kind of saw how we solved the problem of music recognition, he got very excited. And actually, I took a picture of it because he literally at the lunch table, he wrote a $200,000 check, and I was so stunned, a little boy from Belgium, to see that happen. $200,000. I mean, like today, that's still a lot of money. So I took a picture of that check, and so obviously these are kind of these moments that, as founders, outweigh all the negatives that we experience along the journey. Right? That the highs absolutely always clobber the downs. Right. I tend to forget all the negatives, but you remember those positives.
Yeah, exactly. And so I mean, one positive that people are watching may know about is that I use your product every single day on this watch.
I like you.
Apple ends up acquiring the company, and let's touch on that, and then we'll move to the story of Tatari. But I'll kind of frame it as like, in that moment, what made you even decide that, hey, it's time to exit the business, and then you end up doing it to a pretty iconic company in its own right, in Apple?
Yeah, look, a few things. Like by the time Shazam was sold, I was no longer actively involved with the company, in all fairness. And obviously, there was a lot of investment made in the company over a long time.
Yeah.
And I think there was kind of a general shareholder interest to find liquidity, and you got to respect that. Obviously, it's a little hard for me to talk about how that process went. Obviously, there were other people interested, but in the end, I think Apple was a very logical, good fit. And
Yeah.
so,
well, thank you for bringing me joy every time I'm like doing. I'm very into when at least you could go to like workout studios and stuff like that. I will just use this watch and Shazam song is playing, and so thank you. I have you to thank for.
No. I appreciate you using it.
So I mean, so we can jump a bit more to closer to present day and let's talk about Tatari. So same kind of question. What was the origin of how Tatari started? What how did you go from doing this in the music industry? For those interested, you can kind of see your path. You go from that to Google on YouTube, and you've touched a whole parts of the media landscape, right? How do you eventually say, like, you know what, I'm going to go build something to go buy TV for brands?
Yeah. It involved a lot of tequila. No, just kidding. But I mean, look, I think with everybody on this session here, I think the company ideas often come about from these personal experiences, right? And so there was definitely one of those for me as well. So this is no more than 10 years ago. Was running a company called TrueCar in its very, very early stages. And like with young companies, right? You kind of put the team together, you build the product, you ship it, you enjoy some organic growth, you start dabbling around in paid acquisition, right? Paid customer acquisition. Now back then, there weren't that many platforms yet. Surely there was search, right? But even when Facebook was around, you wouldn't have the means necessary to buy ads and drive growth that way. And so there was a point where I was like, well, where do we go from here? How do we keep pushing the company up? And so kind of next on the journey was TV advertising. And back then, if you hear my background, right, TV advertising sounded like heresy to me. Right, it's the good old joke. It's like it's not the problem that half of the money is wasted. It's I don't know which half, right? And so in many ways, my concern got validated. Right, it wasn't that we couldn't see the impact from TV advertising; it's just we couldn't understand it. Right, one day the results were great, the other day the results were not so great, and why was it? What was behind it? And in a most strange way, the breakthrough to understanding TV advertising, right? Because if you understand it, you can optimize it, did not come from people in the media world. It came from the people, the engineers, the data scientists, the mathematicians and statisticians who ran automotive pricing. Automotive pricing is kind of what TrueCar did. It has nothing to do with cars. It's data and analytics. And so it was really their personal interest and curiosity looking into the data sets that were able to make something from it. Now, obviously, that made me realize, one, holy crap, TV advertising does work really, really well, better than I ever would admit it myself. And two, obviously, it can come to the benefit of anybody. And so just over 4 years ago, we started Tatari, really with this goal of enabling not just the big Fortune 500 brand budget companies to enjoy or tap into the advantage of TV advertising, but really the smallest of companies. And I think at Tatari, if I can toot my own horn a little bit, we've done well in that. Most of our clients started with as little as $100,000. Many of them now running, and at a much bigger scale. So to round it up, it's a personal experience, which I suspect many of people on this session will testify to, right? If you look back in their own business.
And when you got Tatari started, so obviously you had the personal, almost the beta that you had done, in your past role to get it started. But who was the first guinea pig of the idea and the stuff you built?
Yeah, it's actually a bit of a funny story, and I should actually ping them because I haven't been in touch with them for a while. It was a company called 5-4 Club out of LA, and so we kind of had cobbled together the first version of Tatari, and it was ugly. Let me tell you, it was ugly. And so we went to that meeting, and then my joke was put on a helmet, right? Because we're gonna get a lot of shit and not so great feedback.
Yeah.
And I was like quiet in the meeting, and they're like, it's great. We're in for $100,000. I still remember. I'm like, how do you mean? What are you in for $100,000? They're like, yeah, let's do it. We're like, okay. And we walked out. We had nothing. We even hadn't like put the company together yet. We hadn't even incorporated. So it was just like, oh my God, how do we do this? You know? And so obviously that was a great hot start. But that was just the beginning.
Yeah.
Obviously, the company, the product has evolved so much since then.
Yeah, well, as a side note for all the founders watching, with my last company, we also we were in the offline media space in a different way. We were trying to focus on this world of sampling and couponing. And we basically took the excess space in packages and turned that into a marketing channel. And similar kind of product development or research development story of we pitched, we were fortunate that we got to know Procter & Gamble through something else. We pitched some brand manager. They're like, okay, yeah, we're in for $80,000. We're like, okay. Great.
Yeah.
Now we do this exact same story. We were spinning it out of another company, but like we didn't have what ended up being called Exact Media at the time. So I love your way of research and development and product development. Of like, will they buy it? Great. Let's go build it.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Back in the day, we'd have stealth companies and you'd be very kind of like coy about your idea. And it's like the best you can do is get out there, right?
Yeah. Expose
yourselves a little bit, and maybe sometimes you get lucky, sounds like you, Daniel, and I did, right? Sometimes you don't, but it's always good feedback.
Exactly. Well, we can start talking a little bit more about, we talked on the edges of what Tatari does, but there's a question here that I'll tee up.
Yeah.
And I think the way to answer this, would be, give us a kind of your little elevator pitch of like, why Tatari, why TV? And then we'll get into some more specifics. But this is a great question from the Athletes podcast. Is TV advertising still worth the money? Could those marketing dollars be spent elsewhere and generate more interest from working with a limited budget? And I think this is a question we talk about all the time in our setup. So, give us that kind of starting view of why does Tatari exist to help, and how would you kind of answer this question for a brand in the right mode?
Yeah, and let's park Tatari for a moment. Let's talk about just TV advertising. Why TV advertising? And so, and I'm going to give a little bit of a US-centric point of view on this, because this kind of our market, we don't necessarily operate overseas, but I don't think it's going to be that different. Look, apart from radio, there's actually no other media that has the reach of TV. Every single household, at least in the United States, is watching TV. By the way, for an absurd amount of times. On average, it's about 4 hours. So I watch 5 minutes of TV a day. So there's somebody out there watching 8 hours to make up for the average, right?
Yeah.
And so you, unlike any other media, even more than, let's say, Google or Facebook or digital, you can reach more people, which is a fantastic way to grow your product, right? Because if you can introduce your product or service to new audiences that you can't find on digital, and that's a win. I think the TV advertising experience is also kind of very consumer friendly, right? First of all, it's accepted. People are they're more used to enjoying TV with an ad now and then. And the ad experiences themselves are often enjoyable, right? They can be very immersive. They're in a lean back experience rather than trying to click it away when you're on your computer screen, or you're kind of fighting the feed on your Facebook. And so it's kind of like those two things combined. I think it definitely has suffered from a lot of stigma around measurement, right? Or accountability, stigma around pricing, it being expensive. And this is maybe where I would segue into Tatari. So these are the things that we have mostly solved, right? The way we approach TV advertising right now, which is kind of the second part of your question, we kind of look more at it as if it were digital and less TV, right? Digital in terms of measurement, it's timely, right? Like next day, it's accurate. But also in terms of buying, it's agile, it's optimized, it's transparent. And so that's really what we want to do. And I see the question here, right? Is TV advertising still worth $1? But I would correct that question and say, make it a single dollar, right? Because as I think mentioned earlier, loads of companies, the majority of companies who start on TV, the starter packages may be $100,000. I know that's a lot of money, but it's a far cry from the millions it was just a few years ago. Even creatives, and hopefully we talk about it a little bit later, right? Making a commercial doesn't have to be a $250,000 production. We know of companies that put it together for a few $100s and have had wild success. So it's just getting democratized. And so, yes, it's still worth it. But like with all advertising vehicles, sometimes they're worth more to one person or company than another. And so you got to test everything and you got to compare everything. And for some companies, out of home is better than TV, or the other way around. Or for other companies, Facebook is better. And so by no means do we say that TV works for everybody. It's as company founders and CEOs, we need to, or CMOs, we need to test it and look at it comparatively to the whole mix of marketing channels.
Well, I think this is a great segue into if one of our listeners here, one of our portfolio companies from Clearco ends up doing some work with Tatari. Can you give us just a short summary of like what that experience and what that path looks like from I come in and start doing an initial test to scaling, and then what we'll jump into afterwards is just some examples of companies who've actually done this with.
Yeah, for sure. And look, Tatari's experience with advertisers is that they very often come out of the digital customer acquisition world. As a matter of fact, we find that they are absolute experts in digital customer acquisition, right? Facebook, Instagram, search, and many of the new platforms now like TikTok. And in that, they look at TV advertising, or they come to TV advertising with those, what I would call higher digital expectations, right? The days where you say like, oh, I'll give me $3 million and I'll throw it like spaghetti on the wall and I'll tell you 6 months from today how it did. That's not a good story, right? And so back to your question, what it means is that when people start working with Tatari, they come in with a digital, which is a healthy mindset, and they want to see results, often in a bit of a direct response like model. Do I get the right customer cost per visitor? What is my customer acquisition cost on TV? What's my ROAS, return on ad spend? They want those direct metrics. And by the way, they're going to compare them apples to Facebook. Perfect, right? And so we'll do this. And so this is how we get people going on TV. And in most cases, we can actually demonstrate it. Sometimes we get lucky. We find those results better than digital. And it's, just high-fiving all over. Sometimes a little bit work, right? We got to optimize. I wouldn't say it's sweat, blood, and tears, but we got to work it. We make it up. We make it better day by day, incrementally. And once that is done, then we typically see kind of that second phase. So now maybe you're kind of running at the tune of $2 million per year on TV advertising. And by the way, like these are kind of like, literally, this is how it goes. Like all of a sudden we get a call and it's very euphoric. And maybe there's been a board meeting or something like that, where somebody says, damn the torpedoes. It works. Why put a zero behind it? Make it 20 million, right? And then it's an exercise. Instead of optimizing for performance, it's an optimization for scale, right? How can I do more of what works, right? So let's say that, I don't know, you bought some cable TV, CNN daytime, and it worked, but maybe you can buy cable CNN primetime more expensive, but you can also buy it streaming, and you can look at adjacent genres to news or other news networks and things like that, and publishers. And so you scale up, and then maybe you're a $10 million per year TV advertiser. And maybe for some people on this session, this feels like crazy, but like if I look at a prospective client, I'm always like, one day you will do $20 million per year in TV advertising. And that's when you come into that third stage, where really to move the needle, you kind of get more into what we would call brand advertising. But obviously your creative might be more aspirational in nature, might have a celebrity, but also the way in which you're going to run your TV campaign, it's going to be more kind of driven by reach, finding new customers, to not grow your company with 10%, but with 5x it. And you almost can look at it as a Super Bowl, right? Not that I recommend a Super Bowl ad, but if you air on the Super Bowl, you get so much more than 30 seconds, right? Obviously, you get the largest TV audience in one fell swoop, right? By the way, it's a very captive audience. Guys like me watch the Super Bowl more for the ads than the game. Sorry, right? There's a water cooler event. You get juxtaposed with kind of big prestige brands, right? You signal quality and all that kind of stuff. It's the halo effect of TV that kicks in. And so to round it up, there's these distinct stages of performance, scale, and brand optimization that you go through.
That's great. Well, on the point of sports, I think the first one I actually love to tee up, and we can have a bit of a conversation. So, a mutual friend of ours at Clearco and myself, it's a guy named Jesse Horowitz, who is the co-founder and co-CEO at Hubble. He was actually on our very first Founders Live for this season that we ran. Probably a couple of months ago. So probably what I'll do here for everyone watching, we'll just tee up an ad, and then we can talk a little bit about this was I think the creative that ran during the World Series a couple of years back. But I've seen it run a whole bunch of different places. So we'll see if this works. This is the ad.
I'm Jesse. And I'm Ben. We started Hubble because contact lenses are too expensive. At Hubble, our fresh daily contacts are affordable and delivered straight to you.
Get your first 2 weeks free at hubblecontacts.com.
So yeah, very simple. It's just them chatting, and again, I know you haven't personally worked on every single campaign, though I'm sure everyone.
This one I remember though. This one I remember. I mean, Jesse and Ben are kind of the founder of founders, right? So I love these guys. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I vividly remember all of this. And very simple founder story, right? Yeah. From the heart, what's the value prop behind their product?
Yeah,
where it went from there.
Yeah, and I mean, they've built an exceptional business, and they're supporting a whole bunch of other entrepreneurs too in what they're doing with their investments and advisory work. And again, we don't have to go too deep into the tactics, but the short of where this spot ran amongst a bunch of other places was around the World Series and this build up to this event. And I'm just curious. I'll kind of post this more broadly. When you think about the vertical of sports, the vertical of live sports. If you were coaching an advertiser, like let's say there's a new Hubble coming out and they wanted to do something with this World Series coming up in the next couple of months, what would be the kind of steps to deciding, should I go pay for that premium spot on the World Series? What does that process look like?
Yeah. And maybe allow me to juxtapose that process versus kind of the old school traditional TV approach, right? Mm-hmm. Where the agency will come in and say like, well, yeah, there's the World Series, and I forget the exact pricing, but let's just say it's easily $300,000, $500,000 for a 30-second ad. They will say like, well, why don't we take 5 ads and cross our fingers, right? And so I probably couldn't disagree more with that, because how do you know, for starters, that baseball works, or how do you know that TV works? Mm-hmm. To be honest, not everything works on TV. And so what we'll do endlessly at Tatari is run a campaign in small doses. We might try MLB, and there's a variety of ways in which you can buy. There's different networks, or MLB.com, whichever it is, but in small doses. Think $5,000. Look, if it goes wrong, you're not going to kill your company over it, right? And we're going to look for positive feedback loops, right? Because once you buy, we'll measure, right? And we'll be very transparent in that measurement, very quick on that measurement. And if it works, then maybe you're going to buy again. Can you find that consistency, right? Mm-hmm. Do I get 3 hits in a row, right? And so if you find that, then you say, okay, well, I bought this small MLB game, right? And this is, by the way, pretty much a journey for the Hubble guys. Mm-hmm. Maybe I buy an airing, just post a big game, right? And so mm-hmm. instead the end game airing was maybe $50,000, but post the game, it was $20,000. And if that works, because it's still the same audience, more or less, I was like, well, that's encouraging, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe I just buy it on satellite. We call it a fractional buy, right? Mm-hmm. But instead of buying $100,000 spots, which is not a test anymore, maybe I just buy it on satellite, right? Mm-hmm. I get 10% of the population, so about 10% of the cost. But from a data point of view, I can still see whether this works or not. And so you build up with confidence, testing, rinse and repeat. And so I tell you now, when Ben and Jesse did those airings during the World Series, it was very schemed. It was very planned. They knew pretty much what they were going to get out of it before the first ball was even thrown. And so credit to them. Yep.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past them. I think for anyone as a small, I always have to plug Jesse. He's the one who taught me this really important concept of how he looks at marginal CPA in his business. He wrote a book about it, so I encourage you to go look up Jesse Horowitz. I think it's called Naked Selling on Amazon, and download. You get the full playbook how he's built his entire business. I wanted to jump to another founder-led creative, friend Zach at Roman. And the way I'll tee this up is, again, I think this creative didn't exclusively run during election week, but it was kind of the main feature where it was. And I'd love to have a discussion about how you plan for something like that. So let me tee this one up.
Great sex is never just about sex. I hear this from Roman members every day. Erectile dysfunction treatment helps men feel more confident in the bedroom, but it also unlocks so much more outside of it. A connection, a warmth. They feel more in sync with their partners. And that's what every couple deserves. With Roman, it's simple to connect with a healthcare professional online and find the right treatment plan for you and your partner. Simple, straightforward, and the way healthcare should be. Roman, let's take care of it.
So with Roman, I know you've been working with them for quite some time. I remember meeting Zach and the team back when they just did their Series B, and I think that's when they first started testing. Before they were called Row, it was just Roman. And so we'll get to the election part of it at the second, but maybe we can talk a bit more about how you got them started and what that introduction to TV was like for them.
Yeah, and so I'll point out. So like the kind of the person who got it started there was Will Faherty, and so a lot of credit goes to Will. We had met him first at another company, Render Runway. Look, I will say this. I'm not so much maybe alluding to the election. So obviously this is a great creative, right? It's kind of, it's a founder story, very personal. It has the functional benefit, so to speak. There's also a bit of a kind of an aspirational component to it, right? Which I love. It's a perfect blend of kind of VR and brand. But what Roman or Ro Health and Will's team practices ruthlessly with great success is this concept of what I would call agile buying. Right. So they look at the results and they will shift strategies and budgets like nobody else overnight to their benefit. And so the results that they get from TV are great. They are not afraid of it's almost like I wouldn't say it's a poker game, right? But they are absolutely not afraid to go all in. But again, it's always very calculated, and they really rely on us, if I may say so, to give them that measurement and then to kind of build a very fast buying strategy around it. We often see with the traditional TV agencies where you lock in your dollars for the next 6 months, right, with a slap on the back, and we hope it goes well. And so in the early days of TV, we kind of really, right, if you're new to TV, we actually will want to do this with you on a week-to-week cadence, right, where we look at the results, measure, optimize from there, continuously keep it moving. It's just very different.
And
well,
I think different from TV, but I think could you imagine running a Facebook ad campaign where you just set it for 6 months and left? Like, people think you're insane. So,
exactly. Yeah. And so why is it acceptable for TV? Thank you. Yeah. That's a good point.
Exactly. And I think really the other question I had was around just touching on creative, because we've seen kind of back-to-back founder-led or featured in the creative. Have you noticed, and I'm sure the answer is, just you should test all different kinds of creatives, but from a D2C brand perspective, where often that is included, as part of their story on their website, like how have you seen, let's say, put it this way, how have you seen brands approach whether or not to use the founder as the lead in the creative versus something else?
Look, like with all things, it's something you need to test. I'll tie back to my first TV experience, where when you had to make the commercial, not only was it expensive in terms of money, but it was actually also very expensive in terms of emotional capital, because nobody could see eye to eye to what the best creative was. Right? You have your opinion, Daniel, I have mine, and we'll argue it out, and then we get all smart, and we're going to do a focus group or a survey. Let me tell you what's best. Let's each make our creative, spend limited money on it, which is totally doable in today's environment. We see even people shooting commercials on their iPhone, and let's run them both and let the market tell us. And I say this with confidence, because for maybe as little as $10,000 on each creative, we'll overwhelmingly see which is better or worse, right? And so back to your question. So in many cases, the founder story has proven to be the better performing one. but not always. And obviously I can't tell them, but we have clients for whom the founder story absolutely bombed. And then we try to forget about that quickly because everybody's, you know.
Look at this other great thing that worked. Yeah.
Yeah. You were just not so good on camera, right? But it's not, look, you gotta, we always say, come out with at least 2, if you can afford it, 3 creators, make them as different as you can stomach, right? The extreme being, one is kind of like live action versus animation, or funny versus serious, right? And then let's pay attention to the results. Let the data and analytics talk, not what you feel. And so creative is a big lever. If there's one kind of difference with what I would say, like Facebook, is that, you know, we find, at least through our clients, that the Facebook creatives, you've got to change them very repeatedly and stuff like that. In TV advertising, if you find a winning creative and you iterate it towards testing and landing that ideal creative, it lasts for a long time. Sometimes we still have clients who run creatives from 2 years ago, and we just can't dethrone them. Right.
That's great. But I think it's great because it does lend a lot of confidence to, you know, why it's worth, you know, the investment in that initial testing is so important, because it sounds like, especially in this channel versus, I guess, more traditional digital, which is its own, I don't know what you call what anymore. But, you know, your Facebook, your Google, talking to all of our portfolio companies, they feel like they always have to be changing and moving. And here it sounds like there'll be a lot more carry, not in all cases, but in some cases, of like, it'll be, you know, there and hard to beat. So I know that with Jesse on his business, he's seen that even on Facebook. Some of the, if you see some of the ads of like where you're just like, you have I wear Hubble, but like you have the Hubble contacts here, and you just some guy poking them, and he's like, yeah, no one can beat that ad. That's why you see it all the time.
Yeah. But look, you know, and then for everybody kind of tuned in, I want you to look at TV advertising just like you would treat Facebook or Google ads. Don't be afraid of it, but hold it to the same standards as well. And switch, right? If you look, CPMs on Facebook might go down, so that makes Facebook better this month, or the other way around. And so always track your metrics. Yeah. You know, whoever you work with, force for the numbers, so you can see them.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. On this topic of creative, I wanted to jump to another example of something, to your point of, can you make very, very simple creative that delivers exceptionally well?
Yeah.
And so I'll tee this one up. It's a shout out to Michael and the team at Calm, who you might have seen here. So, and everyone, if you're having a stressful day, just take 15 seconds as well. This is our little bonus to you. You have a little meditation.
Calm. Download the free app now.
Hopefully we got a little 15 minutes of relaxation. That's why you have to tune into these things. So Calm is also someone you've worked with for a long, long time, it sounds like.
Yep.
Again, tell me their journey with them, and if there's any key learnings you've learned from working with a company like them versus, Roman or Hubble or others.
Yeah. And look, we're amongst founders here. Like, there's a little bit of like a confidence boost to us. I'll just be really kind of like really honest here. So we had convinced Calm about going on TV because we loved their product. We knew it would have fantastic TV legs. We got there, we got it going, and then a kind of a professional CMO was brought in. It was a he, no names. And then he quickly dismissed Tatari and went to the traditional agency, and I guess that didn't go so well. I don't think it was the right person for the company anyway. And so Calm came back to us, and I say this and I share this because it's one of those things where as from one founder to another, you do have those speed bumps, right? And it's kind of true. If you can see through those dark days and come out like we did with Calm, it's always great. Now, a more funny anecdote is that, so of course, it's been great working with Calm and Aaron, who leads that team. But that creative that you just shown is kind of, it's. I think they actually stated that in one conference they paid $200 for it. $200. And so when they first showed this creative to us, we looked at this and we were cringing. We're like, OMG, that's a train wreck, right? But we had to stay true to our word, and everything needs to be tested. And so obviously, Aaron, and the team there proved us wrong. It's been a phenomenal creative. Has played this smartly by then actually not just running ads, but tying it in as kind of a sponsorship or an integration with the election night. If some of us may remember this, that's it on creative. I think Calm is a beautiful testament to that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we can finish off on the other end of the spectrum, which I wish this was a brand I could say I've met people there personally, but I just really love what they do. Is Raffis, and so this one a little bit different of a feel. So a brand like Raffis, it's fashion. It's there's a certain value that they're trying to convey with how the product is made. What can you share about? And this was also featured as part of the Ad Week. If anyone's curious, they can take a look at that link of the case study. But tell me a bit more about Raffis and how this came together.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, that creator is kind of beautiful creative for a beautiful product, right? And there's indeed a lot in that, right? From kind of the higher aspirational goal of recycling plastic water bottles to building an incredibly fashionable and comfortable shoe. How did that come about? Well, I don't know why. I think I'm biased now. I look around and I see products and services where I think like those are amazing. Like I would buy them myself. No, Rotis is a bad example, but right, I see my female friends buying these shoes and raving about them, and I just reach out, right? And so that's pretty much it. I think Rotis, the person back then who was leading, kind of got it all going. His name is Matt Gearing, did a fantastic job in really balancing streaming versus linear TV, being truly agnostic, right? Some people will say, linear TV or cable and broadcast TV is dead. It's all streaming. Or I've heard the argument made the other way around. Look, it doesn't matter. Both are meaningful, both are worthy. But you got to measure. You got to look at them, compare them, and allocate your budgets accordingly. And I think Rotis has exemplified this. Done very well there.
Well, I think this almost ties it back to what we were starting a bit about the beginning of why TV in general is important. Because if again, in any of the conversations I've had, and this is really the reason why I'm so excited that we're partnering, is that once you are really at scale and you're really trying to grow your business to a substantial size, you need to find ad channels that have at minimum, the sufficient inventory to allow you to scale profitably. And because it is still the largest channel, again, particular to North America, to the US, but I'm sure it is a similar story in other markets as well. TV it's one of those channels that once you're at the sufficient size, it's something that you probably should try to figure out, because if you're not, you're leaving money on the table. And it's not to say, to your point, if 1 month Facebook is better or Google is better than TV, then shift your budget. But then that might not last forever, and shift it back. And I think just if you would ask me why I'm excited about our partnership, to kind of go into our finishing thoughts, it's really that, founders come to Clearco not only for capital, but really you're coming to us to find ways to grow and achieve your hopes and dreams. And whether it's selling the business or having a profitable company that you can own forever, growth is a key part of that. And so I think our team is dropping some links in the chat so they can learn about our partnership. But I'd love to hear from you of when I think it was either Eric who had introduced you to Ray, who's my co-founder, actually my last business. I think that might have been where it started. And when you heard about what Skylar and Todd and I were working on, what got you excited about working together with us?
Oh, it's something I had hoped for a long time, right? If you look at and by no means I'm a kind of a finance specialist, but if you look at the general lending space, if as a small company, if you're trying to get a loan, it's a painful process, in terms of the application, the time it takes, and then to add insult to injury, if you pay attention, it seems to me that loans can only be made against specific assets, which then function as collateral as things like good luck going to, I don't know, Wells Fargo and asking for $100,000 to run your TV campaign. Right? It's just not going to fly. And yet we can demonstrate, not just with numbers, but with so many precedents and cases, and we talked about some of them here, that it does work and it actually helps companies grow. So to me, it's a gift from God, so to speak. It's kind of part of this infrastructure that didn't exist when I started my first company, right? It's like AWS for TV funding. There you go.
Exactly.
How about that?
There you go. I love it. It is. It's yours now. High five for that. But I think that's really it. It's that's why we're excited to work with you. And I think, if anything, I feel like our teams and our cultures are slowly, learning how to work with each other. And I feel like a very strong bond with everyone I've worked with. And so I'm just excited for more of that. And so really where I'd love to finish off, as we're up on time, is you can kind of take this either personally or professionally with the company. But, what are your, there's how many months left in the year? Another like 8 months left in the year. It's kind of scary. What are you excited about for the rest of the year?
Personal or business wise?
Let's do both. Give me one of each.
Both. I'll start with the personal. I love spending time with my daughters. And so I love it when they're out of school and have these summer camps, because they have the best summer camps, and I try to join them as much as I can myself.
Amazing.
So I look forward to that. Business-wise, it's big because it's the world of TV advertising is not only exciting and growing, but there's so many shifts that happening. Just think of linear, right, of cable broadcast moving into streaming, and it's so clear to me. It's so clear to me what's going to happen next and what we need to build as a company to really lean in. And so I'm generally just excited about kind of entire product roadmap, from buying features to measuring features. And so like, if I look back at some of my earliest companies, like sometimes we would sit there in the product planning stage and be like, what should we do next? What's the next thing that's going to be a hit? And we just didn't know. And it was kind of like trying things out left and right. For Tatari, it's just very, very different. And so I'm excited. I'm impatient. I can't wait for it all to go live. So yeah, I know this sounds vague, but I truly mean it.
Oh yes, so we can't wait either. We're now on the journey on this together, so we can't wait to see what you put out next, and we'll be sure be singing the praises of that when it's all live. So thank you to everyone who tuned in. Philippe, thank you for spending the time with us today. On Thursday, we have another one of these. So just follow Clearco on LinkedIn. Follow Philippe and Tatari on LinkedIn as well. And we'll see you guys very, very soon.